The next one up is Nick Massey and Brian Schilling building one of the ITLA HO kits. So gentlemen, welcome.
Okay, thanks very much, Jim. Thanks for having us tonight. Just want to walk you through a couple of slides to give you a bit of an introduction to the kit and some of the parts and the materials that we're using here, and then Brian will take over and start doing his magic. So let me share my screen if I may. You guys want to tell me if you see that?
Yep.
You got it? Okay, thanks. Okay, great. So here's the intro building. I call it the intro building only because we produced this as a little bit of a clinic kit that allowed us to show a lot of people in various build-along clinics the features of our ITLA designs. So this is a little laser engraved masonry wood kit. And we're going to show this to you for the next 4 weeks. And Brian Schilling, an accomplished modeler from Toronto, will walk us through some of his tips and techniques on putting it all together. Just to give you a bit of background, you might have seen this photograph on the website for this particular kit, but I'm going to walk through it a little bit. Most of the material here in the center of the photograph is MDF, so it's 3mm or 1/8 inch MDF thick material. This is our standard material we use for making our walls and structure kits from, and even our elevated railway structure kits are built in this material. Very stable, very easy to work with. The laser engraved details that we can get in this through our process into the material is really what sets the kit apart, I believe, and gives you the opportunity to kind of do some neat stuff with paint and weathering. One little tip I'll share right now, when you look at these components and you wonder, well, how do I cut them out of the sheet? One thing I don't recommend you do is to try to snip through this with a number 11 X-Acto, because you could break the blade or you could send some shrapnel flying. What I like to do is honestly push the parts out from the back side of the carrier sheet. And the small nibs that I have in there holding the parts will just break away free. And then you can just sand those off lightly with a sanding stick. And Brian might touch on that a little bit in the near future. Trim parts in this kit are in both birch plywood here, you can see my cursor, and also in laser board. Window frames, you can see where my cursor is right now, are done in the laser board. We'll also recommend to you guys, and Brian will touch on this too, some of these components will have a laser burn, and Clark mentioned this in his presentation a little earlier. That's part of the process of laser cutting and manufacturing kits. So these parts will have a bit of a burn on their edges. And if you want those edges to take paint as well as the show surface of the part does, the best thing to do is just to sand that laser burn off the edge of the component very lightly, and you'll find that you're going to get a good paint adhesion and a glue adhesion as well. The structure is configurable, and I want to make that point to you early because you'll need to decide which way or which configuration of walls you want to use in this case, in your case, I should say. So you can build basically the 3-inch square building that's shown here, 4-wall building. You can also build this as a flat. It'd be a 12-inch flat, and if you'll notice, I've included a 1/2-inch side wall returns. So those will let you turn that structure back a 1/2 inch, and it'll look a lot more complete than just a straight 1/8 inch piece of material. So that's an opportunity for you to consider, as well as a shallow relief. So you could take 3 of those walls and put them 90 degrees together, and you could kick one wall aside, and then you could have a shallow relief building that's about 6 inches in length and 3 inches in depth. Something to consider. Window headers and sills are separate parts, and you can see them. I'm circling them here on the MDF component sheet. And those are separate parts, and the neat thing is you can paint those without masking, obviously, and just push those into the wall panels later. The structures that we produce are mainly intended to be built flat on your work surface. So the walls are designed such that you lay it down, backside down on your work surface. You can press the window frames down into the wall opening, and then you press your painted windowsill and window header in after that. A lot of the details can also be built while the wall is flat, can be added to the wall section. You could even put your signage on in that configuration before you wall up the structure if you chose. So lots of options for you. So in summary here, Brian will demonstrate a couple of methods for painting and some neat construction tips. Along with his guidance, please refer to the instruction set that we provide with Kit, and there'll be some homework obviously between these sessions. Also, paint and assembly articles are available under the specific tabs on my website homepage, itlascalemodels.com. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to Brian, and let's see what you got going on, Brian.
Good evening, everyone. I'm not really sharing screen, but I do have my camera on. So if you want to put it on speaker view, it'll probably be easier to see what's on the camera. Right now, there's a whole bunch of pieces just kind of laying on my table. So I'm going to kind of talk a bit to this. So as Nick had mentioned, the kits come assembled flat, well, in flat and with all the different pieces and so forth, so that you can either take them apart and start doing what you want to do, or you can start preparing them while they're all still in their carrier sheets and so forth. So I've gone through a couple options here on some preparation just to kind of show what I would kind of typically do. I will typically take and I will spray down the parts with just like a flat gray kind of finish, and there's all sorts of different types that you can use. I like the Krylon chalky as for this. You can use a kind of like a primer or whatever. There's also different colored ones that you can use with. Some of them have a chalk finish, some of them do not. I don't suggest using anything with a shiny finish, if at all possible, unless you're talking detail parts, just because getting the shine off becomes more of an issue later on. So Nick, when I've seen him do the kits that he does, usually what he will do with those is he will basically spray the wall surface that's brick with a basically it's I don't know if I've lost the actual cut. Well, red oxide primer paint, and when it sprays, it's quite obscenely dark. And you may be a little apprehensive when you see this, going, what the heck am I doing here? But once you start dealing with the weathering and the washes and everything like that, it will tone right down and look quite nice. I also kind of go a different route, and I'm going to show you a kit that also is by Nick, but where I've done the brick in a completely different manner because I wanted the yellow, Okay, hopefully that kind of shows up. I know my camera kind of goes a little wonky there, but I've actually done where I'll go and use the Hunter stains, the Hunter line stains, to actually get in the crevices of the brick, just because I actually kind of like the darkness of the crevice to accentuate the brick itself, especially when you're going with lighter color brick. Number of the buildings that I have just so happen that they're more yellow brick buildings, which was not necessarily the intent, but they're the buildings that I've chosen to model type thing. So I've gone through with this, and I've almost used the Hunter line kind of rust color as a wash in the grout lines. Then I go and I start dry brushing the brick color on the top. So we'll talk a little more detail about that later, but you kind of come up with a different, and this is it's still rough, but just kind of the idea is I've gone with the darker stains. Hopefully that looks a little better as the base. And then I started dry brushing the yellow, and then I'll spot hit it with some brown and orangey, just to kind of, because I've pretty much never seen a yellow brick building where the yellow is without some sort of texturing and color to it. And then the last steps will be sitting there and using different types of washes or chalks or whatever, just to dirty and gritty it up a bit. So the only thing I wanted to kind of show on this is I've kind of taken a little bit of the stain. Sorry, I'm looking at my screen. It's looking a little fuzzy with but in these areas here, I've actually taken the hunter line stain and just dabbed it in there just to get that kind of the crevices to start popping a little bit. And then I'll go back and I'll dry brush different textures of colors on the stone paints in order to pop that out. So what I did with this building is basically exactly what I'm talking about. As actually, let's turn to this side because you can see the brick. So I've done that exact kind of methodology with all of this. So on this one here, you can kind of see all the crevices and everything, and then just dragging the dry brush of the paint over the top in order to kind of hit the top pieces. On this building, there's a lot of real texture, and actually in the kit that you're being given, that texture is also being replicated. So you're going to have the option to kind of get that level of detail in there. So what it does is gives you a nice base if you do choose to go with the kind of dry brushing technique. Now, with the painted version, this is basically, I've hit it with that red oxide paint, and then I've just completely done it with just a like a chalky gray wash acrylic. And I don't use anything but like the cheap kind of Americana or folk art or whatever acrylic paints. Mix that with some water, get it to a consistency that you like. I would suggest trying it on some different stuff before you do your final piece. And what's good about the kits is there are a couple pieces that you can kind of pop out and use as samples in order to just kind of play with that just a little bit. And then that wash just completely toned down that red, so that now you've got that kind of red brick look. Now, on this other panel, I did something a little bit different as well. Let's see if I can get this. Don't know if this is really illustrating well, but I went and hit certain bricks with oranges and browns before I went and did the washes, just because I wanted to kind of get that nice textured effect that you will see on a typical brick building. You don't want all this to be like the exact same flat color. In sections, yes, but you want some variation because there's going to be different kind of staining or spalling or things that happen over the life of a building. So you want that to kind of build up some level of reality in the detailing that you do to finish off. As for painting these parts, the MDF stuff, this is thick enough that I'll spray the front and whatever, and obviously don't go crazy on spraying that it's just saturated, but you can spray this. You don't have to worry about spraying the back to worry about warping. When it comes to the thinner parts, what I will technically do with those is I will do the spray and then I will spray the backside, just so that when it will start to warp, and then that'll just pull it back down to normal. Nick is correct in the edges. If you want the edges so that you don't end up with the brown because of taking the paint, I sometimes don't sand them because if I do a light coats of paint, that kind of brown coming through sometimes gives me a certain effect, but that's me just playing around with different things. I would suggest that you do kind of give it a sand, especially if you've got any of the little okay, the word's escaping me, but the the parts that are actually holding the part in place so that you're getting rid of any kind of problems with this. I think you might be able to see on this one right here. That's where the piece was attached to the carrier sheet. So just sanding that down just a bit so that you don't have any fit issues. Doing all those before you get to assembling everything is completely important on these. Now, what I found with the ITLA kits is I've had no problems, typically speaking, that parts will not fit where they're supposed to, but it is wood, and sometimes you do have a higher moisture, so the humidity level, you might get a bit of swell and whatever, so you just have to just a little sand on the edge or whatever type thing. But typically speaking, these will go together quite nicely. So I think that if you want to paint these where you're leaving things in the carrier sheets, sorry, some of like these doors, I've painted them in the carrier sheet. These brick covers for the chimney, I've painted them in the carrier sheet. These type of pieces, yeah, I probably will do a fair amount of painting while they're in the carrier sheet if I can, just because it keeps you from losing the pieces because some of them are smaller. But some of the larger size pieces, like these, have enough beef to them type thing that I'm not worried about keeping it in the carrier sheet for dealing with those. So I think that was all we were to cover today. And I guess the homework really that we had suggested is get your kits, get them the base on them, and if you want to do brick with these type of ones where I did the painting with the brick, I masked it and then sprayed that. I masked it and I sprayed this type idea. I did not spray the ones where it's concrete block. I actually have left those with the very light gray, and then I used the Hunter Line stain. And to me, that's giving a very decent level of a concrete block. Now, with final detailing in that, yes, we'll add a bit more weathering to it, but this one I didn't do too much beyond that. With these, if you can get these sprayed or painted the way you want, then you'll be ready to start dealing with the details for the next session. I think that's all we wanted to cover, unless I missed something, Nick.
Well, I think you did a great job there, Brian. Thanks very much. So I guess the homework for everybody is, as Brian said, prepare your parts, do your overcoat and spray paint if you wish. And also think about the configuration of the walls that you want in your final structure. So if you give that a little bit of thought and again, read the instructions, you can always reach out to us offline later if we need to answer some questions between now and the next session. Thanks again very much.
Well, Nick, Brian, thank you so much tonight. That was a great presentation, and I think you're well on your way. So thank you so very much.